Hello and welcome back to How Could We, a podcast by EIT Climate-KIC, where we ask ourselves, how could we achieve a climate-resilient, inclusive and beautiful future for all? I'm your host, Anne-Sophie Garrigou. We created this space to allow for a series of conversations about building hope, curiosity and excitement for a just and desirable future that is compatible with our planetary boundaries. Here we talk to people who inspire us and who are putting transformative solutions into practice. This week we'll be talking to the mayor of the Norwegian city Stavanger, Sissels Hegdal, alongside EIT Climate-KIC Senior Cities Advisor, who is also director of the NetZero Cities Programme, Thomas Osterbaum. So NetZero Cities is a Horizon Europe project that is led by EIT Climate-KIC and that helps European cities overcome the structural, institutional and cultural barriers they face to achieve climate neutrality. The project comes in support of the EU mission 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030 and provides cities with expertise and services tailored to their needs. We chose to invite Stavanger today because the city's policies and actions toward achieving net zero emissions provide concrete examples of municipal climate action. They've been part of several smart city initiatives aimed at making urban living more sustainable. And it's also a great case study of how a city that was traditionally dependent on fossil fuels can pivot towards a more sustainable future. Finally, Stavanger benefits from strong collaboration between the public sector, private companies, and academia, fostering innovative solutions to climate challenges, which is something we're really interested in this episode. So in a few minutes, we're going to talk about the role of local government policies, regulations, and international agreements in shaping cities' climate agendas and how to overcome political barriers to achieve climate goals. We will explore how innovative governance model and policy frameworks facilitate radical collaboration and drive impactful climate action at a city level. But enough of me. Let's now bring in Sissel and Thomas. Hello Sissel, hello Thomas. Thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to How Could We?
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Sophie. Good to see you.
So I'd like to start by asking each of you to quickly introduce yourself. So maybe Sissel, you could start and tell us a little bit about how long you've been mayor of Stavanger, and you could give us maybe a quick profile of the city and the climate-related areas you're focusing on.
Yes, I'm Sissel. I haven't been a mayor for a very long time. I've been a politician for 20 years in Stavanger, but only a mayor since October last year. So it's 9-10 months now, really busy months. And the climate changes and working with the oil and gas industry is probably two of my main tasks as a mayor. I find it very interesting. We're facing big challenges, especially since Stavanger is the home of the oil industry in Norway, and maybe also I should say Northern Europe and Europe as well. We have a lot of oil and gas companies. So we're trying to change from being a traditional oil and gas region to meet the future, to be a part of the energy transmission, and really take responsibility in order to change how we live our lives, how we take care of people, how we include everyone, and also make sure that we have a good society for the generations to come. So my 20 years as politician has been busy, but the last few months has been very interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to be a part of that task and do the discussions to come.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk a little bit later about this transition from being, as you say, home of the oil and gas industry into a city that looks more sustainable. Thomas, can you explain your role maybe first as Senior Advisor for Climate-KIC, and then what do you do as Program Director of NetZero Cities?
Sure thing, great. So as the City Advisor for Climate-KIC, I lead the cities team, which is one of our clusters, seeking to help cities in their climate activity. So I've been with Climate-KIC about 6.5 years and have had the great opportunity to help build out the team that we have now. One of the key components of our work with NetZero Cities is to serve as the platform, the mission platform for the 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030 mission of the European Commission. And what that means is, in simple terms, we're there to provide all the support infrastructure to help the mission cities with their journey towards climate neutrality. That means, as a program director, I lead the work of this platform, which is 34 different organizations from across Europe, includes universities, leading practitioners and innovators in climate action in the city space in a number of different areas, as well as a number of city network organizations. And actually all of the city networks in Europe really working together to support the cities, which is a fairly significant challenge. It means that we have about 300 plus people working every day to help the cities with this process. And as has been noted, there are 100 EU cities plus 12 cities like Stavanger from associated countries, all working together to pursue the objective of climate neutrality by 2030. And so the other thing as program director is we spend an extraordinary amount of time working very closely with the European Commission around helping to put resources in place and simplify processes, and over time, hopefully, drive the sort of policy innovations that can help the cities with the steps that are needed.
Thank you. And I see a lot of that is a lot of collaboration between a bunch of actors, and that's one of the topics of this episode, so we'll dig into that. But first, I wanted to start this interview by asking you, what do you feel or what have you experienced are the biggest barriers for cities to reach climate neutrality? So maybe you, Thomas, you can give us a kind of introduction for what you've seen with the net zero, all the cities involved in NetZero Cities.
To start, I would say approximately 70% of global emissions are generated inside the boundaries of cities, right? So that's an obvious focal point. Cities have been an area of focus for nearly 3 decades now of climate action work. And in many ways, cities from the various levels of government can be seen as leaders in this space. But achieving climate neutrality is incredibly hard. And I think that's the first thing we need to acknowledge. If I start to peel the layers of the onion around that, I think one of the things that's important to recognize is we're now entering a 5th decade of a real evolution into a really globally connected, interdependent economic system. Global trade, supply chains have changed radically in my lifetime. And for most of us who are old enough, our lifetimes, we've seen this change play out. And that's going to be part of what's necessary to address here. Obviously, for a city to address that by itself, it's almost impossible. So it highlights the need for what we call multi-level governance. And in simpler terms, it means city government, regional government, national government, and in the case of Europe, international governance, all working together in a concerted way. And I think it's worth acknowledging that's quite unprecedented for something like this. And so we have to be kind of cognizant of what we're asking people to try to tackle. And if I take just 2 more quick points on this, one is it's clear to us if we're watching the news, if we're looking at what's happening in sort of global affairs in a variety of different places, democratic governance is trying to keep up with the global changes that we've put in place with our economic system. And you can see that it's a struggle. And it's a struggle going forward, if we think about it in the context of cities and climate, in terms of getting the policies right at the local level, the national level, the international level, as well as evolving how we govern. And I think that has 2 components to it. One is how we make decisions and who makes decisions. We'll talk more about that. And the other is how we help citizens accept governance. And I think that's one of the difficulties we face right now is there's really not a clear acceptance of the kinds of policies that we would need to put in place to achieve climate neutrality.
I was wondering if this buy-in from the population, is it because we don't explain to them that basically the transition or the changes that are happening are going to be beneficial, or what is it that you think is happening?
I'd say a couple things about that. One is the large majority of people probably aren't that interested in in-depth explanations of why climate change is a problem and what the specific issues are in our buildings and energy systems, et cetera. But what's been missing is a real strong narrative within each culture that taking this action is not only what we need to do, but that it's good for us both in the short term and the long term. Yes, it's going to involve change, but change is already happening to us, right? So we have to not create a false sense of everything's just going to be fine. Things have changed radically in the last 10 years, for example. And we often dismiss that as a changing landscape when we're considering other changes that we're being asked to consider. And so I think building a larger narrative around this is good for our economy, it's good for our health, it's good for our well-being, and it's essential, right? And I think that sort of narrative and that sort of engagement is going to be necessary to begin to build that sense of acceptance of a shared future that we could all look at and say, this is good.
Thank you, Thomas. Sissel, can you give us some example of the challenges that you've already faced or you're anticipating, and maybe entering to what Thomas has just said as well?
I think Thomas has a really good point when he says that the people, they live in the cities, so we have to engage all the inhabitants, both in Stavanger and in the region in our country. The cities play a huge role to solve this climate conflict that we are seeing, and we have to do it together. I think it's a good saying that emissions doesn't carry a passport, so we could do a very good job here in Stavanger, but we don't solve the problems if we don't work together, and we also succeed in solving the global problems. So that's why I'm so occupied and want Stavanger to play a vital role in working together, not only in Norway and the northern countries, but also with the EU. Even though we're not a member, it's great for us to be able to take part in this network, because we have to solve the problems in each and every city, and it's down to the level of each and every inhabitant living in Stavanger, and how I, as a mayor, can work together closely with them in order to solve the problem. So we need to engage both the citizens, we need to engage the local businesses, the universities, and I'm also very interested in all the knowledge that I know you have in the European countries, and the best practice, and how can we really divide it into the best steps, what actions do we take, and which actions are the most successful ones, because we can all be looking for answers and new solutions and how to do things. But I think if we share knowledge, find good ways of doing things, and work together and collaborate even more, even though we say it all the time that we need to collaborate, I think still we have a way to go, and we need to speed up. That's definitely my concern, that the transmission is going way too slowly. Being in a region that has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience from technology, having so many good actors and businesses I can play together with, I think we also have a great responsibility in taking a good positioning and sharing our knowledge and contributing.
Thank you. Thomas, could you maybe tell us a couple of words on how the collaboration between cities is happening inside the NetZero Cities program?
I think the first thing to note about it is we're building around probably 25 years of pretty good collaboration by cities already. I think some of that has just been informally. Cities are used to sharing information, exchanging around best practices and learning from each other and learning together. So that's been a foundation on which we've been able to build. Basically, our job is to try to help cities do more, better, faster. It's as simple as that. And so we want to facilitate more sharing around the kinds of practices that are going to help cities get towards climate neutrality faster. Now, what that means is it's necessary to acknowledge we don't necessarily have all of the best practice necessary. Some of what we need to do is actually create new practice. And so as a platform, our job is to support cities with real innovation and experimentation into new things that will become best practice in the future. So we provide that kind of support, and that support means giving them space and permission to do innovative work. I think, as Sissel knows, it's quite difficult for a mayor and political leaders to ask their citizens and businesses to be experimental partners. And so we need to help build a partnership that allows for that, provide the right level of support. That means resources sometimes. It means expertise and capabilities that are specific to the challenge, and the partnership and the point of view to say we're a partner in the city and its stakeholders in doing this kind of work. And that's really important. It's a lot easier for Sissel to do her job if I'm showing up there in the same conversation saying, we're here to do this together. We're here to support you through this process. And the mayor or other leaders don't have to do all of the work because that's not a realistic expectation. There are great leaders, which we're, delighted to have as part of the city's mission, but that, we need to be realistic that kind of partnership is critical to this kind of work.
Sissel, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the role of collaboration. What does the role collaboration play in overcoming the challenge we mentioned before, and especially between cities now, like in NetZero Cities? How does that help you to overcome your challenges in Stavanger?
In Norway, we have a lot of municipalities, a lot of small cities and communities. So Stavanger is the fourth largest city in Norway. We're the third largest region in Norway. As I said, our region is special because we have so many of the technology companies taking place. We have a very young university. It's only 20 years, but it's a forward-leaning university. So working together, I think that's what it's all about, being able to involve all the stakeholders, to think that I, as a mayor, or my political team, that we will manage to convince our citizens you have to change, and tell them how to do it. I think in working together, to discussing, to try to involve and have them take an active part. And that's what we also try to do in the region. As the largest city and with the small communities around us, I invite the other mayors to come together and to discuss, because it's only as a team and as good neighbors the region can solve this together. So, for instance, we work together with the port authorities and try to make sure that the ship transport is as clean as possible, and to cut the emissions. We do that with the garbage, we do that with water supply, we do that with transportation. So it's nothing that the city of Stavanger does alone. We does it in a collaboration already in the region. And now we're trying to have a larger perspective, and doing also together with you and all the 112 cities that are part of the Mission City program. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm looking so much forward to the collaboration we can have, and what we can share as examples of what we do in Norway, and how we try to take a leading role, and also learn from you and examples you have. I met cities that are part of the Mission City program, like, for instance, Groningen in the Netherlands, which is also part of the World Energy City partnership that Stavanger also is taking an active role. We didn't need to spend much time talking together before we understood that me visiting Groningen and see how they use, for instance, the community center, and how they can play an active role in talking to the citizen, having meeting places, having their ideas addressed. We're only in the beginning of the transformation, but my opinion is that everyone has a much better understanding of the need to change, and the need to speed up, and the need to work together.
Thomas, maybe you can share examples of successful collaborations within NetZero Cities that have led to significant climate action already?
If I consider a couple of examples, there's been, I think as Sissel said, Stavanger is the fourth largest city in Norway. There's been a good degree of informal collaboration amongst the Scandinavian capital cities for many years now, and they've been sharing information about different things that they're doing, talking about different policies, and in some cases where they have shared needs. And so I think that can be seen, if we look backwards, even before the mission itself, as a way in which we've got a number of cities who are very advanced in understanding how to take action, how to reduce emissions, et cetera. And just use as one example, Stockholm's work going back 20 years now, to when they put in a pricing scheme for cars coming into the center of the city. And the way in which they did that is quite remarkable. And, we could go into that in greater detail at another time, but, it really represents, to this day, even 20 years later, an example of a best practice that other cities can learn from. And so they've been doing quite a lot of that work over the last many years. And now we're working together to identify the things they still need to do. So we desperately need work together at the national level as well as the European level around standards for things like carbon capture and storage, because that's an emerging technology component of what we need to do as part of the transition. It's still not commercially viable. It's not at a replication and scaling point yet, but it will be. So what are the standards now so that those investing in development of that industry know where they need to get to ahead of time? We're also looking at how to reduce packaging in the waste stream, because packaging represents a significant source of emissions in our heating networks, where a lot of heating networks are using part of the waste stream to produce thermal energy for heating our buildings and producing hot water. Well, the plastics that get thrown into that waste stream contribute a lot of emissions. And so those cities all working together with national governments are the only way we get to a scale in which we can change the policies that will reduce that kind of plastic in our packaging. So those are some of the things that are happening. I did want to call out a specific example of where cities are working together in a national context. And we have a number of good examples where the cities in any particular country are working together around the mission itself. But in Spain, there's been a movement over the last 4 years. So again, even before the mission started, to work together around this issue. And they've created a national platform that provides support for all of the cities. It's a place where they all work together and they're learning how to do the kinds of things that are necessary. So they've started to engage all the financial institutions in Spain to work together with those cities around things like how to finance the necessary changes in our buildings to reduce their emissions and help them accelerate converting to cleaner sources of energy, for example. So they're starting to build muscle and an understanding of the value of working together rather than working on their own sort of approaches. Another thing that's come out of that is in one of the cities in Spain, Valladolid, they've been able to forge a partnership with the local football club, which is a big deal in that city. It's a huge part of the culture. The president of that football club is a legendary international football player who's made a very visible commitment to the mission and the objective. And it changes the way that the city can engage citizens around these sorts of conversations and begin to help to build a different kind of narrative, as Ed mentioned earlier, which will be critical to the steps we still need to take in the future. Those are just a couple examples.
So Sissel, as you said, you've been working as a politician for 20 years. So you must have experienced and seen so many examples of collaboration between maybe different level of government or between different stakeholders, including in maybe city climate governments. Is there any best practice that you've noticed over the years?
I should say a little bit, because I still think we have a long way to go to really collaborate, to really share experience and best practice. Norway is a small country, but we have from far away up north and to Stavanger on the west coast. It's very different, both the climate and how the people live their lives, and also the businesses we have surrounding us. So we need to have a much larger scale, and the view must not be only around municipality and city and region, but also take interest in helping other cities that doesn't have the same economy. Stavanger, for instance, one of the things we do, we try to help our citizens to change their habits. So we support buying bicycles, we support buying new heat pumps. We're privileged because a lot of our energy in Norway is already renewable. We have a lot of electricity from the water resources. But still, we also need to transform. We have succeeded. 9 of 10 cars in Norway is when you buy it, it's electric cars, and that's quite significant numbers compared to the rest of Europe and USA and who we like to compare us with. So we have succeeded in some areas, but we still have a long way to go to really being able to say that we are cut the emissions and net zero. And I think also if you have some of the people that are more the critical voices are in doubt that we are going to succeed. But I think we need to have high ambitions. As I said in the beginning, we need to set high goals. And I hope that together we can really put effort in showing what are the most important areas to do something.
Exactly. And as you're saying, the habits can only change if there is policy support for the infrastructure to exist for people to ditch their car, or for also being able to switch to a heat pump or something like this. Without the policy support, that's just, you can't expect people to just change. One thing you mentioned now is this need to have very high ambition. And that leads me to my next question, Thomas. How can the NetZero Cities program, and I know there are other initiatives as well, but serve as kind of models for other cities worldwide to achieve their ambitious climate goals?
I think there are a few different elements to this. I think first it's worth acknowledging that, and I think this does build on Sissels' point. Part of the mission is explicitly to serve as a laboratory for learning to help not only all of Europe, but globally as well. This is a global issue, requires global action. We really need to have that be part of what we're doing. So as we build out our programs, as we capture the learnings and document those learnings, it's really important we do that well so that all that information is accessible to others, useful to others. That's one component. I think that the second component that I sort of bear in mind on that front is Africa, Asia, South America, North America, they're all different contexts. They have different cultures. They have different government structures. They work in different ways. So one of the things we need to constantly be aware of is it's not simply a copy and paste exercise. There really needs to be a deeper level of learning and insight about what needs to be done and how, and trust that the institutions and people there will know how to use that information. And I think that's the third piece, which is to engage globally with a level of humility. Sure, European cities may be leaders in climate action, but they should be. And what they're able to achieve doesn't mean that they all of a sudden should engage other cities saying, you should do this too, but rather say, this is what we've learned. Here are the tools and resources that we have available to us. Is this useful to you? And to be far more of an open, humble partner in that process. And I think that that's quite critical. There tends to be a lot of, particularly around advocacy organizations, and it's not a criticism because it's their job, but there tends to be a lot of shoulds, and we really need to avoid the shoulds and focus on the coulds. This is what you could do. This is what we did. How could that be useful to you in your own context? And then trust that they're able to use that in the most effective way.
Sissel, I just wanted to ask you, we talk a lot about transformation and transforming the cities. And if we transform the cities, it is for the population, right? So what do you see as the main strategies to ensure that this urban climate action that we're engaging in is inclusive and equitable?
The most important thing we can do is try to engage, try to involve as many as possible. In Norway, we have a small distance between us as politicians and our citizens. We have a democracy that is well tailored, and we have a high level of trust, a low level of bureaucracy. So probably what I will spend most time on in the months to come is to really be a part of the discussions, taking part in the businesses, at the university, with my citizens, on all different levels, both especially here in Stavanger, in my city, but also in the region, and try to have a voice at the national level. Because I think for me as a mayor, taking place in all these different discussions, it gives me the power and to be able to raise my voice and to be a leader. I want to lead, just not only follow. I want Stavanger region to play a leading role. I won't succeed in that alone. I think that's very important to acknowledge, that I need the working together with each and every member of my city and the businesses, in order to give information why it's so important, why we really need to do these changes, and also to seek information, to learn. As a politician, I'm not experts in all these different fields, but I can open doors, I can bring people together, I can facilitate meetings and conferences. So I think it's quite a complex situation, but also extremely interesting and challenging. We need really to split it up and ask each and every one of us, what can I do to contribute? How can I change? What is my role? I'm looking forward to all the different answers, because especially young people also, I really want to stress that we really need to listen to the young generation and let them also play an important role, because they're the future, and they have great thoughts on how we should develop our city and how we should plan for growth, and still we really take care of the nature and do it in a way that is good for all of us.
Thank you. And I think it's fascinating by hearing you both. I know it's very different, but you both have a role of kind of facilitating these discussions, opening those spaces, and you have a responsibility to also not only give, but to listen, right? And I think this is really inspiring listening to you both. I wanted to ask you a last question on the future. So Sissel, maybe can you tell us a little bit about the future climate plans that you have for Stavanger?
We have made a very ambitious plan, but that's a strategy we made. Now we're looking into all the actions we need to take in order to fulfill that strategy and succeed also with this strategy. And that is involving all the different companies and the stakeholders that we have. I had a meeting with the minister yesterday, the Norwegian minister, and I have addressed a meeting with him next week in order to make sure that also our government is supporting the action that Stavanger is taking. And also, as I said, I will invite the mayors surrounding and being a part of Stavanger region to involve them. So we have a very good strategy, but we need to spend more time on determining where do we have the most outcome, where should we put the effort. And as I said, transportation is one area, but there's several. So we still have a way to go in order to fulfill that. But being part of the Mission City program, that challenges us. So when we're now hopefully signing the city contract with the EU, that's really what we have to deliver on. And so we're having really busy days now in Stavanger, in our administration, to be able to deliver on the requirements that you have put. And then hopefully by that process, we will be both learning and realizing what we need to work more on and how we can also pick up some good ideas from the other cities.
And just for the listeners that might not know, the Climate City contract from NetZero Cities, it's a commitment and a collaborative framework, right, that unites cities with stakeholders across sectors to co-create and implement ambitious systemic strategies aimed at achieving climate neutrality by 2030. Thomas, I wanted to ask you also, you said that the NetZero Cities program started 2 years ago. What is the next steps? Because now cities are signing or are working on their Climate Cities contract. A lot of them have already signed it and it was approved by the EU Commission. And more cities like Stavanger are in the process of getting those Climate Cities contracts signed. What are the next steps? What are you expecting? What are you hoping for?
So hopefully within the next, I would say, couple of months, nearly all of the cities will have completed their first version of their Climate City contract. About half are done now. Now the focus really shifts to implementation, aggressive implementation, and that requires a number of things to happen simultaneously. One is we really need to prioritize engagement with national governments and building out national support. That's going to be critical to the process. We talked about the different levels of government and the fact they need to work together. A lot of the policy barriers that cities identify and we can see as holding us back from getting to climate neutrality need to be addressed at the national level. The European Commission and the EU have a very specific role in participating in conversations between national governments, cities, regional governments, and trying to advance that process. Our job is to make that as informed as possible and to really help elevate the needs of cities around climate neutrality and the societal benefits that would come from that. So the energy transition, improving how our buildings not only perform from an energy perspective, but making them healthier, making it easier for people to walk and cycle in their communities, reducing emissions, reducing waste, etc. So that's one key component. Another key component is with that to bring very specific policy needs out into the open so that we can engage with citizens, with businesses and key stakeholders to really have an honest conversation about what's necessary. Too often we find ourselves in an environment of we're not going to talk about things that people don't want to talk about. And we end up, with this sort of long list of things that are considered untouchable. And part of our job is to figure out how to create space for those conversations and to help people see that not only are they touchable, but solving them together is actually good for us. It's not just something we have to do like bad tasting medicine. It's actually good. And so that's another piece that we're going to have to tackle. And then the third is mobilizing capital and restructuring markets so that investments from private sector are supporting climate neutrality outcomes in new buildings, in our vehicle technologies, in our acceleration towards cleaner energy sources. And, Norway has a lot to teach us by understanding that their economy over the last 30 to 50 years has benefited greatly from fossil fuels. But their future isn't and can't be dependent on that from an economic perspective. And that's the narrative we need to create. There's nothing wrong with what's happened. It's what are we going to do about it going forward, given what we know? And building that sort of narrative and helping to shape markets, not so that we force people to react overnight, because that's often painful and creates political problems, but to rather say, over the next several years, we're moving in this direction, and we're going to try to make that deliberate, predictable, and understandable so that risks are managed and investors can make decisions that are not counter to common sense.
We're now going to go to the last question of the interview, which is a question I ask every guest, is what would a beautiful, just and climate resilient future look like for you?
My dreams for the future is that we really take this challenge seriously, and that we succeed in engaging and involving everyone. Not only thinking of ourselves and our city and our citizens, but really do this in a global matter. That we look after people, make sure that the young children, they can live good lives in all parts of the world, and that we really manage to collaborate and work together in solving these huge issues that we have ahead of us. But I think that would be beautiful, that we came closer together and really worked as a team.
First and foremost, it's not for me to say, it's for cities to say. And in fact, I'd go a bit further, and it sounds counterintuitive, but there's a real logic to. For cities, we're looking at this global issue, and what we should avoid is imposing our views on others, but rather creating an environment in which people can express their own view as to what that is. And even at the city level, it may be that's too big of a scale. We should be looking at our communities and saying, what does that look like for you in your community? Because you're the one who has to walk to the grocery store, to the market, to schools, and to work, etc. You have to be able to ride your bike. You need to accept the future that we're going to have together. The best way to do that is to build a shared vision at the local level, at the community level, which is the only way we can get to that sort of global impact.
Thank you so much, Thomas and Sissel. It was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast and a really interesting conversation.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, and thanks, Sissel, for joining.
Thank you all for listening. Feel free to leave us a comment, to share the episode with colleagues, and to contact us if you have any questions. We leave you with some resources in the show notes for those of you who want to learn more about the NetZero Cities Programme. In the meantime, you can listen to our previous seasons and follow Climate-KIC on social media to learn more about what we do. This podcast was produced by Barbara Mendes-George. Thank you all again, and see you soon.